Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to the 2020 JET program, Post-Arrival Orientation Panel Discussion for ALTs. My name is Pierce and I work in the Department of JET Program Management here at Clare. I'm joined today by three panelists who have extensive experience on the JET program as ALTs and have so kindly agreed to be with us here today. And two of our panelists, Rishma and Betsy, if you would please say hello. Our current ALTs, and Andrew, hello Andrew, is a former ALT who now works as a program coordinator at Clare. And with that said, I think that our panelists are going to do a much better job than I will of introducing them. So if you could all please just tell me a little bit about yourselves, starting with, say, Betsy.
Okay. Hi, my name is Betsy Lenahan Skillings, and I'm from the United States in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm starting my 5th year on the JET program, so I'm very sad. It will likely be my last year on the JET program. But I've been teaching at a high school in Kobe, which is in the southern part of the main island of Japan. And it's very hot today, but it's sunny, so I'm having a good day.
That's good. Thank you, Betsy.
I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Betsy. And how about you, Rishma? If you could please go next.
Hey, hi everyone. So my name is Rishma Hansel and I'm from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. I'm on my 4th year on JET and I was lucky enough to be placed in Tokyo, in the heart of Tokyo City. I'm also the prefectural advisor, the JET PA for the Tokyo private school JETs. And that's been a really interesting experience, my time so far. So looking forward to sharing some good stories today.
Thank you very much, Rishma. And Andrew, if you would please share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. My name is Andrew Susan. I'm now working as a program coordinator at Clare. But before that, in my previous life, I was working in Kumamoto in the southwest of Japan for about 5 years. And I worked at 1 junior high school and 4 elementary schools. So I was kind of moving around a lot, and it was more in a rural kind of area. So I think I can speak to the rural experience in Japan, and I look forward to sharing with you all today. So thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much for sharing a little bit about yourselves. I'd like to go ahead and just jump right in and get started with the discussion, if that is all right with you. The first topic I think I would like to bring up is one that I'm sure many ALTs today are very curious to know about. And let's go ahead and start with Rishma for this question. So let's just jump right in and say, this is her question. So could you please briefly describe your first day, maybe even your first week in general, arriving at your host city, your contracting organization, just kind of give me a rundown of what happened. Who did you meet? What did you do? Did anything kind of take you by surprise? And is there anything that you wish you maybe would have done a little differently looking back?
Okay, good question. Yes, so I visited my contracting organization 1 week after the Tokyo orientation, and I met the principal and vice principal first, as well as some senior teachers of the English department. And I was whisked away almost immediately to get my whole life set up. So we went to the bank, and we went to the real estate agent, and we went to visit the different parts of the school, and they gave me a tour. It was a little bit overwhelming because I was still, dressed in my full Tokyo orientation gear and had no sleep, but they were very adamant that we had to get all of these things done in this one day. So it was really nice to have everything done and have them there with me. So they provided all of the language support and the translation and getting everything set up. Is there anything I wish I did differently? Yes. So Tokyo summer is very hot, and I did the full 3-piece suit and heels to meet my vice principal and principal, and they all greeted me in tracksuits and cool biz, and that's one thing I wish. I wish I kind of dressed a little bit lighter for all of the activities we did throughout that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Tokyo, we can all attest to that. Tokyo is ridiculously hot. A lot of Japan is hot, and we're gonna hear a lot about that today, I'm sure. Yeah, let's jump to, thank you, Rishma. Andrew, could you tell me a little bit about your first experience?
Okay, so definitely it was hot in Kumamoto as well the first time I got there. I was also in my full suit. They told us to wear that for Tokyo orientation. So I came, and two of my supervisors from the Board of Education and another ALT came to greet me at the airport. So that was kind of nice. There were signs and everything. Welcome. It felt like a celebrity or something. I don't know. And we got whisked away, but my supervisors immediately told me, take the suit off. You don't need to wear that now. And we went to have some lunch. And then we went actually right after that to meet the mayor of the city, which I did not know was going to happen on the very first day I went to my contracting organization. So looking back, I should have prepared a little bit better my introductions. You'll have like a aisatsu, or like greetings are really important when you come and meet your supervisors and stuff at the first time. I wish I'd prepared a little bit more, but it was okay. We laughed, and he even talked in English a little bit with me. And then afterwards, like Grishma, I went to get my bank account set up, get the phone, everything like that, and went for a homestay actually for the first 3 days when I was in my prefecture. So that was really nice to get used to living in the area, and I could ask any questions I had to my homestay family. It was really nice.
That's great, Andrew. Thank you. I'm curious, Rishma and Andrew, how did you go to the bank and get set up and stuff like that? Did you take a train or car or?
Oh yeah, we took a train initially to get to the bank, and then for the real estate agent, they took a taxi. But thankfully, my school, they helped me get the train tickets, they paid for the taxi, and all of that was done by them. Because at that point, I was far too dazed and confused by time zone differences to work out anything.
For sure.
Also, I think like they helped me with changing money. So you might come with not enough yen and not know, how much you need to take out for certain things. So they definitely helped me get that organized.
Okay, great. How about you, Andrew? I'm just curious.
Yeah, in my case, the distances are quite big in my town. So we went by car everywhere. And I had bought a car from my predecessor, but the insurance paperwork didn't really clear until about 2 weeks after I came. So I had to sort of rely on other people giving me rides. At first, I felt awkward. I didn't want to be a burden. But my supervisors were so kind and were able to actually just take me out from the Board of Education. We drove to the bank, decided on a plan of what I wanted, drove to the cell phone place, and we became pretty close pretty fast. They didn't speak a lot of English, but we could communicate a little bit. So it was really thoughtful that they went out of their way to do that for me.
Right. I asked because I think I'm the only person who's ever taken like a bike ride with my supervisor to the bank, basically in the middle of summer. And he's this, older gentleman who I didn't expect it really. It was really out of left field. Like, hey, let's just hop on these, tiny little bicycles and hop across. And it was in Tokyo. I was a Tokyo jet, and I've never met anyone who had a similar experience. But bicycle rides with your supervisor, you'll never forget them. But there's no place for those in the summer. I haven't asked Betsy, but how about you, Betsy? What was your experience like first coming?
Well, very much the same as everyone else. In Kobe, it was also very, very hot. And like Rishma, I was wearing my full suit and my pin heels, and so that was very uncomfortable. I was dragging my huge luggage along the way. So I think my only regret would have been that I had brought a t-shirt like to change into, or at least another blouse to change my sweaty clothes. But I guess I am glad that I wore a suit on the first day, because everyone was like, ooh, you wore a suit in the middle of summer. That's bold. But I think it made a good impression. So I was happy about that. And like everyone else, the feeling of being whisked away, I totally understand. That's exactly how I felt. And two teachers from my school came to the Hyogo ALT meeting point to pick up me. And it was one English teacher and a social studies teacher who wanted to come because he wanted to show me his new car. So we drove back to my school. They were so kind, so welcoming. They were asking me all about myself. And when I arrived at my school, it happened to be my birthday on my first day of work. So when I arrived, all the students already knew my name and they knew that I was coming. And so all the students who were doing their sports activities and club activities were like, "Hey, Betsy, hi, happy birthday." And they started saying happy birthday to me. And so it was really, really wonderful. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to love it here." And it was just a really great, warm experience, warm and hot experience.
Oh, that's really, oh, that's sweet of them to kind of check that out ahead of time. It sounds like you all had quite a warm welcome. Sorry, Betsy, to steal your joke, but I mean that literally and figuratively. Although our arrivals may be arriving just after the worst part of summer this year. So hopefully the worst part of summer is kind of past at this point, but we'll see. Okay, so Japan in the summer is certainly no joke, but moving on, I'd like to talk a little bit more about kind of this startup phase and settling into our homes and our schools a little bit more in detail. And I'd like to go ahead and just maybe start with Andrew on this one, if that's okay. Just kind of thinking about what expectations you had coming in, if the reality met those expectations, did you have any difficulties? And if you just have any general advice for adjusting to kind of just life in general in Japan.
Okay, yeah. So when I first found out about my placement, I wasn't exactly sure, where it was. And looking up a lot of info online, it didn't really give me an idea of what the place would be like. So I knew some of the touristy parts of my town, but I didn't really know until I actually got there. So I didn't really have any real expectations going in. I tried to think, okay, whatever situation I find, I'll try to deal with that. And so with home, it was really nice. I had a place that was very close to the station. And there was another actual teacher from my school who was living close by that even before school started, we sort of became friends. And he would help me out a lot with knowing what supplies to buy, stuff like that. But one sort of challenge that I had in my home, actually, is when I got there, I found that there were some bug traps that were already set up from the previous ALT, who sort of left them there. So, oh, what is this now? So, yeah, going through and all the bugs that you can find in the Japanese countryside. I hate to say it, but it is the truth. They do exist. You should be prepared. It took me a while to figure out, what are the products that work the best. But there's some stuff that I put, outside the door, and some stuff for cockroaches as well that I was able to find and actually put it sort of out of sight, and so that they wouldn't come into the door or anything like that. And so after I figured out what products work, it was a little bit good. But in the moment, I thought, oh, what am I going to have to deal with here? So that was something that was unexpected. But with regards to schools, yeah, I had 5 different schools. And so, after I think about the first week or so, me and my supervisor went to give an aisatsu, or a greeting, to every school that I worked at. So we would just drop in and talk to the principal or any teacher who was there and sort of say, hi, I'm the new ALT, just so they can match, a face to the name, and things like that. So just with that number of schools, it's sort of hard to start up a routine and figure out, in the beginning when to sit down and plan lessons and things like that. Getting into that after summer vacation as well. But sort of overcoming that, it just took time, and just being able to figure out, okay, so this is my supervisor, this school, this is who I can talk to. And everybody was really kind and helped me. They knew that I was kind of still shell-shocked and, struggling with a lot of stuff. But I got a lot of different materials, and just to know, okay, this school starts at this time, because some of my schools did start at different times too. Just getting settled down, and after about a month or two, just sort of trial and error, kind of figuring out, when was the best time to get the teachers in the room and things like that. I was able to get into a nice, comfortable groove, and I started to be able to settle into my schools a little bit.
Great. How many schools was it again that you taught at? Can you remind me?
So I taught at 5. I had 1 base junior high school that I was at most of the time, and then I would rotate out around 4 different elementary schools. So they were my visit schools. I would generally be at the junior high school, but then sometimes at the elementary schools.
Okay, so kind of getting a feel for the schedule that
Yeah.
was required
Yeah.
to hit all of those schools. Okay.
Yeah,
A
just
little time to get, used to, I'm sure.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrew.
Yeah.
Okay. If I could go ahead and maybe ask Rishma, what was your settling in like?
Sure. I think as regards to the home, I definitely wish someone wrote a manual like how to care for your Japanese home, because there really is so many things that we don't take into account, especially people who might move into completely bare homes, like with no stove, no fridge, and have to figure out how to get those things. So it was getting acquainted with recycle shops and my JTs and teachers letting me know that there are all these different places where you can buy secondhand things that were really affordable, and outfitting your home and having the supervisor come over to call the Tokyo Gas, and have them set up the gas for me. Those are things that I definitely would not have been able to do if it was just me on my own. And as for school, I think the piece of advice I want to tell all arriving Jets would be to just take a few days to observe what's going on. Like, look at the ways teachers greet certain other teachers, to figure out, the hierarchy, who's in charge, who might be the head of this department, to listen for the bells and like when do they have meetings, and just to look at the way that everyone interacts and see how you can kind of fit in those lulls. Can you go and introduce yourself? Is this a good time? What's going on there? So looking and watching and observing. People were very, very curious. So a lot of teachers came up to me and were like, oh, can you tell me about you? And that was quite nice. And having a lot of omiyage on hand to be like, nice to meet you. Here, try this. It's from my home country. Is a good thing to always have in your back pocket, just to make conversation and get around the school and figure out what's going on.
Okay, thank you very much, Rishma. I agree. Yeah, being observant this first couple of weeks and just kind of like observing everything that's going on around you. And if you're not asking a lot of questions, I feel like you're not doing everything you could. So thank you, Rishma. And Betsy, do you have anything you'd like to chime in with on this question?
I agree with a lot of what was already said, in that you should try to become accustomed with the schedule as soon as possible, because that was something that I was taken aback by a little bit. It was so different from the schools that I had taught in America. So I didn't know that all the teachers would suddenly get up and leave and go to a meeting in the middle of the day or something like that. So that was something that I was a little bit shocked by, and I didn't know that there were meetings that I was also supposed to go to. And so I think I would just, exactly as everyone else said, pay attention. As for my expectations, my predecessor was in contact with me before I arrived in Japan. And she had told me like, oh, well, the teachers are really quiet and they keep to themselves. So don't expect to make a lot of friends at work. So just letting you know. And so I thought, oh, okay, well, then I was a little bit worried about that. But when I arrived, I found that to be not true at all. And everyone was super, super helpful. Like others, they helped me get my bank account set up right away. They helped me get my cell phone. They went around with me to so many different shops because I was trying to unlock my cell phone. You can't if it's an iPhone from America, so don't try. And it was wonderful. And they're so kind. And I think I couldn't speak that much Japanese at the time that I arrived, but I kind of made an effort to with the non-English teachers. And I think that really made a big difference, because maybe some of the other teachers were, like was said before, curious. They were a little bit shy about using their English, like would it be good enough to talk with a native speaker? So I think it really had to come from me to kind of put myself out there a little bit and say, oh, hello, or konnichiwa. And then after that, they were so warm and, oh, here, have the snack. And like, are you getting enough tea today? Like, are you fine? It's really hot out. And so, yeah, I think that was the expectation is that I wouldn't have very many friends at my workplace, but that's not true at all. It was super, super fun. And I talk with teachers, not only the English teachers, but all departments now. So it's really, really great. Very like a family here.
Aw, that's really nice. That sounds really nice.
Yeah, that sounds very positive and proactive. That's great.
Mm.
So overall, I guess, I mean, kind of this, you know, observing and keeping this positive can-do attitude and an open mind, I think is definitely all very helpful advice for settling in smoothly. So thank you all for sharing about that. If I could also, we're still kind of talking about this intro period here. So let's kind of move into the actual teaching part of this and thinking about the first lessons that we participated in. Your first team teaching lessons, and this can include maybe your self-introductory lessons as well. But what were your first lessons like? And do you have any advice for new ALTs who are going to be starting their first team teaching lessons soon? And maybe, Betsy, we just heard from you, but would you mind jumping in on this one and sharing?
Sure. I like talking about teaching, so this is fun for me. My first lessons were my self-introduction lesson, and probably everybody that's coming is thinking about their self-introduction lesson. But something that I was taken aback by was, even though we are assistant language teachers, the teachers around me were just like, anything is fine. Teach what you want to teach, just go. And so they said, well, you know, if you can throw in some of the grammar points that they're studying in this textbook here and there, you can do whatever you want to do. So that was a little bit, I was a welcome shock, but I thought that I would be a little bit less busy than I actually am. So at that time, I think I was teaching 18 or 19 classes per week. And I was in charge of being the lead teacher for all of those classes. So I had a lot of planning that I needed to complete, but luckily, since we had some time in the summer, I had some time to get some things ready. And if I had some advice, I think my advice to new ALTs would be to be very smiley and positive, because even if what you're saying in English doesn't all come across and isn't all understood, your smile will be very well understood. So I think students will have a very positive feeling towards you if you are smiling and positive during your first lessons, even if you're very nervous. And I would also say, keep it simple but active. So if you're planning a lesson and you're just talking, I think students are going to be a little bit bored by that, or maybe a little bit overwhelmed. So, depending on the school, of course. And if they're talking with each other in English from the first class, you'll have set a really good precedent that when you're with the ALT, we're going to be speaking English, we're going to be listening and talking to each other, and we're going to be very positive. So I think setting that very active and very English-friendly outlook is really important for the first lessons, especially.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Thank you, Betsy. Rishma, what were your first lessons like?
Sure. Yeah. So exactly as Betsy said, it will be a self-introduction, and I had just about 18 classes. So talking about myself every day for a whole week, the self-introduction, you know, I find ways to entertain myself after the first couple of them. I'm a visual learner, so I love using pictures and videos, and thankfully my school had all of the equipment that I could do that. So I prepared a lot of different materials to show the students, especially coming from Trinidad and Tobago. A lot of them have never heard of the country. So putting that into context, you know, using Google Maps to show them the distance on screen, having different pictures of places where I grew up, and the basic things, food, animals of my home country, sports, famous people from the Caribbean were all in my deck. And I made little interactive Q&As, so like multiple choice questions, like how long does it take to fly from Trinidad to Japan? And the kids had fun, you know, putting their hands up and trying to guess the answers. And it was a good way to get to know me and for me to get to know them, which was really fun. So yeah, I would say use a lot of visuals. Music was good as well. And it kind of helped them associate me with fun and engaging English language. That was a good way to start the ball rolling. my bit of advice would be, if there is another JET at the school, if you can sit in on their lessons. So that definitely helped. My first week, they told me it was okay to sit in and watch my co-JET interact with the JTs. And that really helped me to figure out where that ALT JTE relationship starts in the classroom and how that works. So that would be my one piece of advice.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rishma. And I guess if I could just piggyback really quickly off of that, I was also a private school JET, and I didn't have any co-JETs working at my school, but there were a number of other native English-speaking teachers, and they had a very similar, perhaps a more main teacher role, but they also had a JTE in the classroom most of the time, and just seeing how they, again, being able to participate and see how they interact and work that balance was also a great role model for me starting out too. So even if you don't have a co-JET, you might have another native English-speaking teacher to model after. So thank you both for your comments. And Andrew, if I could go ahead and pass it off to you, what were your first lessons like?
Yeah, they were also self-introduction lessons. I didn't have any other sort of co-JETs around in my city. There were about 6 in the whole city, but we were all working at different schools. So unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to see some of my co-JETs in action. And also at my school, we didn't have as much technology. There were some like smart boards and things like that, but I brought a lot of pictures. I'm from California in the United States, so a lot of pictures of beaches, palm trees, things like that. I tried to make it as interactive and fun as possible. But the thing that remains for me in my mind is, because I taught elementary school, 4 different elementary schools, so every class had to do a self-introduction. And so for very young learners, especially, try to make a lot of pictures. Pictures are universal. They can see it and understand. Make it fun, and don't make it just talking all the time. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And always there was a question and answer period with my young students, and they would ask the cutest things like, simple things like, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite fruit? But it would start to get crazier, like, what's your favorite monster? What's your favorite vehicle? That was the first one I had ever gotten here. Favorite vehicle? I'm like, plane, train, automobile? I don't know. So just having to think of all these questions on the fly too. And a lot of the students at that age, they would just speak up in Japanese, blurt something out. And so I had studied a little bit of Japanese before. So I tried to sort of say, in English, what they were saying back to them, so they could get a good model of kind of hearing that English and maybe start to copy it as well. And yeah, it was really fun. A lot of those first lessons, it was mostly me with the students and trying to get them to speak with each other as well. But afterwards, even too, the team teaching dynamic, I think, is important. So don't take all the responsibility on yourself. You can try to find out some way to get the JTE into the lesson. In the class, they're looking for that sort of interaction too. They don't want to just be standing off by the side either. Try to get them involved. And then it's okay, so they're the Japanese, ambassador, and you're the ambassador of your country, and you can model, good cross-cultural relations with them through your relationship for the students. So they can say, and look at that relationship and learn a lot from that. So yeah, that was my experience.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. We are going to kind of stay on teaching a little bit here, continuing to talk about job-related matters. But in addition to this, it's also, I think, important to build these kind of friendly and trustworthy relationships, of course, with your colleagues, speaking of team teaching. And so we'll maybe talk about students here in a little bit, but first let's maybe just focus on the colleague aspect of this. Do you have any essential tips for building these positive relationships with your colleagues, with your team teachers? And just kind of as an addendum question, I'm curious, because this tends to be the case quite often. JTs are crazy busy. They have so much on their plate. What do you do when you just can't get a hold of them and you can't sit down and talk about a lesson? How do you cope with that? Andrew, do you have any thoughts you'd like to weigh in with?
Okay, so first off, talking about building, positive relationships with your teachers. In my case, I had one supervisor for every school I was at, and that supervisor changed every year. So I had 5 different supervisors in total for each school, plus a supervisor at my Board of Education. And those supervisors at my schools were kind of like the go-between. So I would talk to them and they would get maybe some of the other teachers together so we could plan lessons and things like that at that school for that week. And so making a good relationship with those supervisors was really important to me. It's something very, very simple, but through my self-introductions, when I went to the schools, they took us to give a little self-introduction. I just talked about some of my hobbies, actually, and I found that some of my supervisors actually shared that same hobby, hiking. I love to hike. And so they would start to tell me about all the trails and stuff up in the mountains, and I couldn't understand everything they were saying because there's a lot of difficult Japanese in there at first. But they would say, "Okay, don't worry, next time." And then I'd come back and they'd have a full map of like the trails, like in the mountains, and just pass it over to me and say, "Here, you can take a look at that." So in my case, it was sort of through the hobbies that I found like, okay, this isn't just a robot or something. This is another person from another culture, and even though we can't really communicate as much as I would like to, at first, we're slowly getting there and just building that relationship. Drinking parties are very popular in Japan. That's one option you have if you want to go and build up relationships after school. There's no pressure or anything like that to join these parties, but if you want to, I think that's a good way too of getting to know your teachers in sort of a different setting. And I don't drink at all either, but still, it was just really a good opportunity for me to meet some of my teachers and get to know them outside of class, especially because of all the sheer number of supervisors I had. It was very difficult. And a lot of them had the same name. And one year, I had 3 supervisors who all had the last name of Tanaka. So it was very hard to keep it all straight in my mind at first. But yeah, I don't know. How about everyone else? What do you think?
Yeah, how about you, Rishma? Would you like to chime in here?
Sure. So I'll do within school and then outside of school. So within school, I visited a lot of the clubs. So within my first couple of months at the school, I was in the tennis club, in the calligraphy club, in the soccer club. Every club that they had, I visited, and I got to meet the teachers, and I played a little bit as well. And that was a nice way of bonding with teachers outside of the English department. And quite a lot of them spoke English because my Japanese level is very low. So they were able to find a safe space to communicate with me around the kind of thing that they were interested in, which whether it was, a sport or a hobby. And then eventually I found the club that I wanted to stay in for the rest of my time at the school. So that was really nice. And then whenever you pass them on the hallways, that was something I could use to start conversation, like, oh, did you play badminton yesterday? Yes, we did. We won the match. And it's a good way to get involved and know when your students have games and you can cheer them on. And the teachers really like that kind of involvement, especially as a foreign teacher. You want to show them that you are as interested in their school as they are in your lessons, kind of thing. And then outside of school, I definitely agree with Andrew. Drinking parties, enkais are a great way to just fast track the bonding process. A lot of my teachers love music. They love singing. And that was a way that we could kind of, share interests in songs. And they loved singing songs in English. They're like, Rishma Sensei, sing with us. And that really helped. Like that first week of enkais, yes, I went to work exhausted the next day, but it really did help kind of lay the foundation because a lot of them ended up being my team teachers. And we ended up using a lot of music in our lessons and having students listen to the songs and sing along. So it was a good way for them to get to know me. And in terms of if JTs are too busy to meet and discuss lessons, I find what helps is I would often prepare a lot of different activities that I might want to do, write things down and leave like little sticky notes, oh, this is from Rishma Sensei. This is a 10-minute activity. Can we do it? ? And just leave that on their desk and they know where I sit. And we have a little pen pal relationship if there are often, at meetings or going there. Sometimes even taking that extra 10 minutes after school to wait for them to come back from homeroom and just talking through with them is useful, but every JT is different. And that's something I had to learn, that everyone has a different schedule, everyone has a different approach to their classes. And as ALTs, we have to kind of be flexible and figure out how we can work well with them, rather than saying like every JTE should have, you know, dedicate 5 minutes of their time to me. No. So finding that flexibility was where I found middle ground with my teachers.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rishna. Yeah, I communicated almost exclusively through Post-it notes with one of my teachers. She just didn't do email, and I was like, okay, that's fine. It worked out totally okay, but it just really speaks to that point, really being flexible. And instead of expecting every JTE to adhere to your wants and needs, it's really about finding, you know, what works kind of for everyone, and yeah, making it all kind of flow. And Andrew's point about communication, the fact that you're able to juggle so many supervisors with such similar names, communication, and I can attest to this, Andrew is a great communicator, but communication is absolutely key. Making sure that what you need to say is getting across to them, that message is being received, and there's a two-way, you know, kind of channel going. Betsy, do you have anything to add about your own kind of essential tips for building these positive relationships?
I want to chime in and agree that the Post-it note situation is really good, and I would also recommend that. And one really good thing to do would be, if you notice that some of your teachers don't really take a look at what you're reading, or take a look at what you're leaving on their desk right away. If you leave like a little, like a senbei or like a Kit Kat or something on what you want them to read, and with a little note, then they'll read it. They definitely will read it. So, and to go along with that, I think giving omiyage is a really good way to build your relationships with your teachers and coworkers around you. So when I arrived, I tried to like keep a list of everyone that did something for me, because there were so many people helping me. It wasn't just one person that took me to the bank and to, you know, get my phone straightened out and everything like that, but like each teacher around me took part of their day to help me with something. So I think one thing that kind of saved me in the end, because being really overwhelmed at my first day at school, is I like took a little note like, okay, Tanaka sensei did this, Sakamoto sensei did this, and it helped me to simultaneously learn their names, and then like I need to give this person a thank you note or an omiyage or something when I have a chance. And I think that's something that really improved my relationships with my coworkers really quickly. It doesn't even have to be like a long letter or like something that you wrote to them, but just, you know, from your heart, just write something like thank you on a sticky note or like a cute little stationery, and then leave an omiyage, and you'll be amazed at the kind of response that you get. Because, so like I said, this is my 5th year now, but some of the teachers that I gave thank you letters to, they displayed them on their desk, and they're still displaying them on their desk like 5 years later. So it really does make a difference, and it really did improve my relationships quickly.
That's fantastic. Thank you all for your insightful answers. I do see a kind of common thread in addition to what we've been talking about, which is sort of just that this proactiveness, I guess, comes from the ALT typically. Sometimes it just takes a little more effort on the ALT's part to make these connections happen and build these relationships. You shouldn't just kind of sit around and wait for them to be built for you. And I guess just personally, something I always think about in life is that, you know, people tend to remember how you make them feel. They might not remember every little thing that you said to them in a certain conversation or something like that. So kind of taking the time to, like Betsy said, keep track of who has done what for you, and make sure that you show appreciation for those small acts of kindness. I just think it goes really a long way. But yeah, all like excellent points. Okay, so the next question I would like to ask all of you is, who is your go-to person if you have a work-related issue? And honestly, let's just open up the floor. Whoever would like to take this one first, by all means. Okay,
sure.
Rishna? Sure.
Yeah, I recently had a work-related issue, so this came in pretty handy. I had to renew my Zaidu card, so I figured out that my supervisor, who I would usually go to with work-related issues, actually was totally unaware of those kinds of procedures. And there was someone in the office who dealt with all of the jet contracts and understood everything. And so now I have two go-to people. So there's my supervisor for things that exist within the workplace, which include my schedules and my classes and teaching things. And then there's the office staff at the main office at my school, which help me with all of my jet-related things, such as like contracts and holidays and understanding days and times, things like that. So they are my two go-to people for solutions. But then also there's an older JTE. And I think a lot of ALTs have told me there's kind of, there'll be like a father figure or mother figure teacher who is just so helpful. And, you know, maybe they can't solve the problem all the time, but they'll definitely provide that air that you can just vent to, you know, with anything going on. So yes, you might find those three archetypes, characters.
Yeah, I hope they exist for everyone. Oh, that's funny. Would anyone else like to add to that, Andrew or Betsy?
Yeah, I sort of had two supervisors at my Board of Education. And it was actually a little bit confusing at first to figure out who I was supposed to be talking to, because the two supervisors actually picked me up from the airport as well. And I wasn't sure, you know, their specific titles and everything, but eventually I found out later that one was for, you know, jet related things, contract, time off, things like that. And one was just sort of like a lifestyle supervisor. If I had any like questions about like my house or like, I don't know, how to do laundry or any sort of thing, they were there for that particular purpose. So that was really nice. That wasn't a work-related issue per se. Yeah, no, I've had to talk to my supervisors for work-related issues. Yeah, with getting my Japanese driver's license, that's something in my area. If you don't have a car, it's very hard to get around. And so, you know, I bought a car from my predecessor, and then I drove on an international driver's permit for a while. But then I needed to change that into a Japanese license, and there's a lot of sort of procedures that go with that, and it was very confusing. And I had to go to the testing center numerous times because I actually failed twice the practical exam. I'm from a country where you have to take the practical exam as well as the written exam. And so I think, though, for two United States that you don't have to do that. But anyway, it was very difficult. But they really helped me out, and I was able to take some time off. One of my supervisors actually went with me to the course and sort of helped me figure out what I needed to do. So I was just really grateful to her for that. And I did, like, you know, Betsy said, I got her an omiyage afterwards, and she was really, really appreciative of that. I think it was a Kit Kat, actually. And it's just the sweetest lady. So I never felt really concerned about contacting my supervisors. I know in some instances, maybe for new jets, your supervisors, they might have differing levels of English, and your Japanese might be not as good. But you know, in my experience, I found that my supervisors, they both tried really hard to understand, you know, what we were talking about, and they really put in a concerted effort to make sure that I felt like I was comfortable and safe, and all my needs were being taken care of, you know, professionally or personally. So I'm really grateful to my supervisors for that.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And Betsy, do you have a go-to person for any, and it doesn't have to be work related, but personal is fine too. A laundry supervisor.
You could definitely say that I have also gained many Japanese mothers and fathers along the way, so it's been really nice. There's one older English teacher in particular who always calls himself my Japanese father. So if there's ever something that's going wrong, whether a lesson plan didn't really go very well, he's always available to bounce ideas off of and offer, you know, helpful criticisms. But it could also be, you know, lifestyle, as was said before, like if there's even something going wrong, if I'm having a bad day or something, he's always, you know, there to support me. And he's had me over to his house to meet his family many times. And yeah, I'm really blessed to have those people in my life. And so I think without him, I think a lot of things wouldn't go so well with my lessons. So I'm really happy that he's there. And I think one other thing that I would recommend to new ALTs is to clarify if your school has like a go-to person for the ALT, because when I came to my school, I had heard that there would be a supervisor for me, and I asked the English teacher nearest to me, do I have a supervisor or someone that I go to for any problems or, you know, work-related things? And she said, oh no, that's everyone, but it was her. So, so I think she just didn't really want the extra responsibility. So I think clarifying who it's supposed to be, just in case, is really helpful. But the bonus of that was when she was like, no, everyone is your supervisor. Then the good part of that was that actually everyone like stepped up and they were all really helpful to me. So I gained a lot of allies instead of just having one. But now I have another supervisor who is extremely helpful with, you know, visa related things and, you know, anything that might go wrong at my apartment. She's always there to help too. So yeah, being very clear about who you can go to is really helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point. I like that you said everyone is your supervisor. And I think it's almost true to like an extent in that, of course, you have like a go-to person for specifically jet-related matters and paperwork and things like that. But yeah, I think it just depends on the problem, the nature of the problem too. You know, if it's a teaching-related thing, you probably won't talk about, you know, someone in HR, unless it's like a scheduling issue possibly. But even then, I would still talk to, you know, the teachers, the people who are most like immediate to that problem first. To see what they think and see if you guys can come to a solution first before escalating it further. And I guess another main takeaway that I would like to just kind of iterate here is that the contracting organization for all JET participants is actually the employer of the JET participants. So while you might have an issue that you think you need to go talk to Claire about, it may very well be that it needs to be solved kind of at that local level with your supervisor. And if it is something that you don't feel maybe super comfortable about, it's maybe possibly a sensitive issue, you have your prefectural advisor, Rishma. And I'd love to get your insight on maybe, you know, a little bit what it's about, I guess what kind of problems you run into as a prefectural advisor. And if you don't mind, if we could just kind of seamlessly, you know, squeeze that segue into that right here. I don't have a slide prepared for that per se, but I'd love to hear about, obviously protecting identities and things like that, but just generally speaking, what kinds of problems that people can go to their PAs with and what kind of help they can expect to get.
Sure. Exactly as you said, I think in a lot of instances, JETs aren't sure who to go to with those things. You know, if they should go to Claire, if they should go to their school or their supervisor or anyone else. And that's when they come to us. So usually a lot of the times they would email me or message myself and my other PA about an issue. And then we're the ones that let them know what channels they should go to next. Oftentimes they're not really sure how to word certain things. So like, let's say they feel like they have too many classes or you know, they're exceeding their time at school. We help them with kind of crafting that email or how they should approach the situation or giving them the information that they need to go to their supervisor. Say, hey, look, you know, my JET contract says this. Isn't it strange that I'm working this many hours? Things like that. So the PAs are just there to help with general school and lifestyle issues, and sometimes they just come to us with stress. Say, I'm stressed because this JTE, you know, we don't get along, and it's almost like therapy in some instances because there is no direct solution. But yeah, definitely wherever your prefecture, where you land as a new JET, find your PAs, get their email addresses, and have them be a point of contact as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rishma. And if you are experiencing, you know, something that's maybe it's personal relationships at work, you're not getting along with somebody, we also, Claire offers counseling assistance programs, mental health subsidy, as well as free online counseling, so that you can talk with a licensed professional, completely unrelated to JET, and just kind of, you know, get all these thoughts, off of your mind, and again, have someone like a shoulder to lean on, and maybe get a professional third-party opinion who has no affiliation with JET, to sort of work through some of those maybe personal relationship matters and things like that if they arise. So, okay. Well, kind of got a little bit heavier at the end. I'd like to kind of go back to the topic of building positive relationships, if that's okay. And we got really great advice for building this kind of great rapport with your colleagues. And I wondered if we could kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about building better relationships with students. And I wondered if we could just go through, maybe starting with Rishma. Sorry, I just got your opinion on this last topic, but if we could just kind of have you keep talking here, what would you suggest? What advice would you give to ALTs in terms of building these better relationships with students?
Sure. So the first thing my co-jet and I set up when we came was something called International Lunch. And it's 2 days a week. We have a small classroom and we eat our lunch in this empty classroom, and we welcome any student who wants to speak in English to stop by. And it started off as just casual conversation, them just wanting to introduce themselves in English. And we slowly introduced other things. Like sometimes we would ask them to bring different food, or I might make something from my home country and my co-jet would make something from his, and we would share that together, or we would show different videos or watch international movies. And it's something beyond English. So yes, we would try to speak as much English as possible, but there were days when they had questions about Korean languages and French and Spanish. So just providing that space for students to come was very, very helpful. And then most schools would have an English language club. So joining the English language club and having the students come in was a good way to just get to know students and have them feel safe, feel comfortable, and enjoy English outside of the classroom. Other than that, we worked hard to make the students know that they can come see us anytime. So we told them where our staff rooms were if they wanted us to check their essays, or wanted, to share something about their study abroad. Can you help me practice my conversation? Just making yourself available, and not sticking to, I'm only your teacher when I'm in the classroom. Outside of that, please don't talk to me. Just being open and friendly and willing to assist help build that relationship with my students.
Great, thank you, Rishma. What are your thoughts on this, Betsy, if you don't mind?
A lot of probably what I was thinking was also already mentioned, really good ideas. I think another thing that I would do would be not to necessarily pressure your students to always speak to you only in English, because if you, for example, get angry for them speaking Japanese during class, or if you just kind of barrage them with like super fast English and then just wait for them to understand, I think it puts a lot of pressure on them as English learners to be 100% perfect. So I think letting your students know it's okay to make mistakes, and even if some Japanese slips in there along the way, it's okay. I'm not mad. Teach me some Japanese. I think that's a good thing to do, is to make the learning reciprocal. So it's not only I'm here to teach you English and that's all. It's, well, I want to teach you English and I want to teach you about my culture, but I'm also here to learn about you, and I care about you and your culture. So please teach me too. I think having that kind of dynamic really helps my students become more interested in foreign cultures and in English, because if I'm always trying to expect them to be perfect, that's just an impossible expectation for anyone. So.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Betsy and Rishma. Andrew, do you have any thoughts you'd like to add?
Yeah, piggybacking off what everyone else was saying. At my base school, so because I taught at the one junior high school for the vast majority of the time, a lot of the students weren't really interested in English. It wasn't an academically motivated school. There were a lot of students who were into sports and things like that. And so I sort of took that as an opportunity. This is the exchange part of being a JET. to help teach about more international cultures, things like that. And I found that a lot of my students who weren't interested at all when I tried to bring up pictures or something of my home country, something like that, were interested actually when there were like big sporting events going on. So I was around during the World Cup, and I believe I made some English boards as well for like the Olympics and things like that. And that was a really good way to get the students motivated and interested, because for the World Cup, they decided which countries that Japan would be playing for the first preliminary rounds. So you have, these 3 different countries that some of the students had never even heard of before. And they were all really interested in that. So even though I'm from America, I wanted to sort of show them, about different countries around the world. And so I brought that sort of this sports talk into some of my lessons. And it really piqued up their interest a lot, I think. And even with the Olympics back in 2016 or so, when it was formally decided that Japan would have the Olympics, I put up different English boards, things like that, and just talking about, different countries and different people there. And that was something that some of the students who hated English, would never speak it in the classroom, afterwards would come up to me in the teacher's room, when they were there for something else, and say, oh, Japan's going to win. Japan's the best. And I'm like, no, we'd have a back and forth and, about the games. And it was really a good way, I think, of getting close to them, I think. And, like Betsy was saying, not always using English and expecting them to understand, everything, but having a give and take as well. They could sort of tell me about, their team, and, I could talk about the different countries and things like that. And it really worked out well, I think, in my situation.
Yeah, I definitely think like getting involved in the students' interests and seeing what they're interested in and wanting to talk about that is really big. Next year.
Can I add
So
last thing before we move on?
yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Sorry, I had one thing that I wanted to backtrack on.
Sure. Is it about the students?
Yeah.
By all means.
I wanted to encourage everybody to take part in any school events that are going on. And Lisa had already said that she went to every club and introduced herself and participated. I think that's amazing and a really good idea. But also, if there's like sports day or the culture festival and things like that, to really get involved and be like, oh, can I take part in the dance? Or can I be in the relay race? Or can I make something with your club for the culture festival? It's a really good way to get kids interested in helping you learn about the culture too. So like, even though I'm one of the slowest people at my school, I always run in the relay for sports day and all the kids laugh, but that's exactly why. So I think it really helps everyone open up to you.
Yeah. Did anyone else participate in the sports day?
Yeah, I participated in the sports day in the, they called it the PTA event. So with all the other members of the PTA and for some reason me, and I was always the slowest one every time. Every year it was the same thing. We had to push a little hoop with a stick around a course or something like that. And I was always the slowest one. So all the students in the broadcasting club who were there, talking about the sports day would always say, Andrew Sensei, please, ganbatte kudasai, try your best. And it would just be like, I felt like a celebrity, them cheering for me while I was going so slow with this little stick or anything. But I agree that it's really a good way to get to know your students outside of the classroom as well. And, and the students are already sort of pumped up for their sports day. So they might just burst out and say something in English when they see you, and that they would never say, in the classroom. They're already motivated and excited, and it's a really good thing to try to participate in that, like you say.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing. Does anyone else have any final thoughts on this topic? Okay. Before we do move away from this kind of idea of relationship building, I would like to touch on maybe one more question. And this is going to be about integrating yourself into the community around you. And this is kind of just like, and this could be related to your school, but also just kind of the local community, even outside of the school. Just curious about what some of your expectations and your reality, or the reality facing those expectations were concrete examples that you might have, things that projects you got involved in, volunteering, whatever, that you actively were involved in to join in the local community. And really I could turn this over to anybody if anyone has would like to start off. Rishma?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, so when I first got to my small town, I had I came here with very little Japanese. So the first thing I tried to do was go to the community center and sign up for their Japanese language courses. So I would recommend anyone who's coming in, even if they feel fairly confident, just going to the community center and joining a class is a great way to network and meet different people. So we met a lot of the people who were teachers, were all volunteer teachers. They were very friendly, and it's such a great way to figure out what's happening in your little town. Like my town had so many festivals and street markets and events that I would not have known about if I didn't go to the community center. And the students who were there were all a mix of like international students who came to Japan either for work or for study, and that's where a lot of my friends outside of JET came from, you know. And we had that kind of community building, learning a language and chatting with the local people, which was really nice. And through that, I asked if I could host cooking classes, because I would always talk about in my little jikoshokai, I would talk about Caribbean food and how, you know, interesting and different it is from Japanese food. And they said, oh, would you like to cook? And so every year since then, I've been hosting a Caribbean cooking class for Christmas, during Christmas, and sometimes in summer. And we would invite anyone in the community to come by. They can bring some food that they've made, and we eat and we talk and we share. So that has been a really great way to kind of build that community. And everyone knows me now. They're like, oh yes, she's Rishma Sensei. She's the English teacher from Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm like, yes, it's me. So it's been a great way to get involved. So I recommend doing that. Join your community center. Find it.
Can I come to your cooking classes? Because that sounds really fun. Betsy too. Andrew, you want to come?
Yeah, of course.
Andrew, might you have anything to add to this question? Did you get involved in your community?
Yeah, you know, at first my community was very small. I looked at the actual population of my town was about 30,000 people, but it was basically a collection of villages. So the population made it seem bigger than it actually was. So at first I wasn't sure how to get involved, what was going on. And like Rishma, I did go to the community centers, and not a Japanese classes per se, but I signed up to do some other things. And I found at the local rec center in my town, they were having a sports, and specifically beach volleyball. I started up, and this was not, you know, in bikinis or anything like that. This is actually regular volleyball, you know, just played with a big plastic inflatable beach ball or something like that. And it turns out that actually, you know, I went there for the first sort of lesson, not really knowing who would be there or anything like that. And one of the teachers who I just met at my Aisatsu, when I went to my schools before, was actually there too. So I said, oh, Andrew Sensei, come on. And so we actually sort of started a little team together. And, you know, they were very, very competitive with the beach volleyball. But just something like that, keeping moving, you know, because I had been coming from, you know, America, and then just being able to stay in shape too, and have this sort of social aspect to it, that was really helpful for me. But something else that was sort of unique to my town is that all the ALTs were part of a DVD project where we actually like went to the local TV station. This was for work, but we would actually film little skits and things like that for students at elementary schools all over town to watch. So not even the ones that we're teaching at, but like they had this time dedicated in the morning called Enjoy English, and they could use that every morning. So many students from other schools and things like that got to know, you know, my face and where I was from, that I started getting invited to other things as well from that. So that was sort of a unique thing. Be on the lookout. You know, there are, you know, ALT initiatives like that in other towns as well. And then maybe that's a good way to sort of get your face out there. And then, I mean, some people, it's not, if they're not comfortable with that, that's fine. But I mean, I think for me personally, it was a really good way. And then I started getting invited to places, people's houses, having barbecues, things like that. And I was able to get involved in the community that way. So that was cool. Although at the end it got a little bit tiring when all the students, even at the supermarkets, were like, "You're from the video," and I'm like, "Yes, I'm shopping. Please don't." But yeah, it
I'm a
was fun.
celebrity. That's great. Thank you. How about you, Betsy?
I think that going to the community centers is also a really good idea. As for me, there were karate classes going on at the community center, which were really fun. And I also joined a local hip hop dance group. So that was a really fun way to still be able to like stay active, but then also be connected to American culture. And it was really, really fun. And one other thing is, I know that we're all saying like, get out there, do all this, put yourself out there. And that might be very intimidating for a lot of people. And if that might be a little bit much, another good way would be just to become like a local, like a regular at one of your like local pubs or coffee shops. And if you go there often enough, they will for sure remember you, because you probably will make a quite a different impression on everyone not being from Japan. And yeah, I started going to my local Starbucks because that was something that I could kind of get a little bit of America to come with me when I was living in Japan. If you're in a rural area, you probably won't have that, but I went there almost every day. And it got to the point where if I didn't come in, they would be like, what happened? Are you okay? Are you sick? Is something wrong? And at one point, I did get quite sick for about a week. And they were so worried about me, they wrote me like a get well soon card, and they made me like a little gift basket, and they're like, Betsy, we missed you. Like, so it was so sweet. And just by being a patron at your local coffee shop, I kind of felt a sense of belonging in my community, and I made a lot of friends. So that's another recommendation that's a little bit, safer than suddenly going to beach volleyball. That was very brave of you, Andrew.
That's a great point, though, and I like that. Of course, Betsy, you're from I guess, a slightly more urban area, that I guess comparatively speaking. So even, I guess, in this urban environment, I was in Tokyo myself, like Rishma, and honestly, when I got to my placement, I didn't feel like there was much of a community, so to speak. It was just big, massive city that just swallows people up. And really, it's not true, right? That local community feel, you can still get that, even in a giant city. And I think that is kind of what JET is all about, is like that interaction that happens at that local grassroots level. Without that, JET just would not be JET. And so even if it just means you being a regular at your coffee shop, at your local coffee shop, like just sharing and partaking in that kind of exchange, I think is really important. So Rishma, you mentioned studying Japanese at your local community center. So if that's an okay topic for you all, I don't know how passionate you all feel about studying Japanese, but let's go ahead and talk about that for a little bit. And if you don't mind, if I could, Rishma, since you brought it up, could I pick on you for this one first? Do you have any advice for studying Japanese, how to stay motivated, not burn out, anything that you use in terms of resources that you can recommend?
Mm-hmm. So from the time that I landed in Japan, when we got to the community center, it was 2 times a week, and we bought the textbook Mina no Nihongo. So it was a very concise textbook with reading, writing, listening, and some like dialogue and speaking activities. And having those two face-to-face classes helped me. I know a lot of people prefer self-study and can just buy the textbook and do that on their own, like listening to the audio tapes, but I need interaction. Like I need someone to actually have a conversation with me. So going to the community center, that helped because they had other activities outside of that, like a tea ceremony or, a Sunday morning coffee meetup, where I could actually practice a lot of the Japanese that I had been studying at school. Outside of that, I used Duolingo just with practicing kanji and reading. That app worked really well, and it was something I could do in my downtime, like in between lessons. I can get in, my 5 minutes of Duolingo a day, something that helps you to stay motivated, even if it's just tiny increments of language learning. I think that helps. What else did I do? Also, making small talk with people at the konbini really helped my Japanese. That kind of got me over the fear of speaking fairly quickly. So I would always have something new, some new topic I would want to chat with my local grocery store cashier or the lady at the konbini, like, oh, tenki ii ne, I would just try and practice. That really helped, just to be brave and to kind of put yourself out there as best as you can, even if you don't have a formal school that you're going to. So yeah, that would be it for me.
Making mistakes and learning from them is like the best way to learn a language. Like you said, a little bit each day. I think that's a great point. So like if you do maybe 30 minutes a day, or even just every other day or something like that, that consistency I think is key, as opposed to doing like one big 4-hour session on Saturday or something like that. So yeah, squeezing in little study times when you can. Okay, great. Let's talk, we'll continue talking about this if that's okay. If Betsy and Andrew, do you have anything you'd like to weigh in with, either of you?
Yeah, I think that studying Japanese is definitely important, but sitting down and making time to think about, your own goals, what is your end goal? What do you want to be able to do with the language? And then making a plan to work towards that goal is really important. Not just kind of trying a little bit of things, but having sort of a focused idea of where you want to be headed with your Japanese. For example, I knew some former ALTs who wanted to be able to know enough Japanese to pass the Japanese language placement tests. And that's a different kind of Japanese than being, fluent enough to be able to speak at work. And which is different to being able to be involved in the community or something like that. So thinking about your goals beforehand, and then planning for that. For me personally, I did want to pass the Japanese language placement test. And so for a period there, I was studying, flashcards every day at my downtime at work. Things like that, actual physical flashcards, because digital ones for me, it didn't work. It didn't have that same sort of visceral feel of, I don't know, flipping it, something of memory related, but that worked for me. But I know that's not the goal for everyone. Everyone has different goals. So I think just making some time and thinking about what you want to do is important.
Okay, thank you. And Betsy, would you have anything to add?
I love studying Japanese. So that might not be everyone, but even if you don't love studying Japanese, I think that I would encourage everyone, regardless of your ability coming into Japan, to try to learn something, because that shows your willingness and your openness. And I think that just makes you that much better of a cultural ambassador, knowing like, I want to learn about your culture, so come on over and learn about mine. So even just starting out with simple phrases was really helpful for me at work. Like I tell everyone this, if you can only learn 3 phrases in Japanese and use them at work every day, they will be a lifesaver. And that's good morning, ohayo gozaimasu, thank you, arigatou gozaimasu, and goodbye, I'm leaving for the day, osaki ni shitsurei shimasu. If you say those 3 things, instantly people just are like, oh, cool, wow, we love you. So it was such an easy way to like open that door, and then they would teach me more Japanese from there. So that was really good. And I would say, if you like textbook studying, my favorite introductory textbooks, I have so many textbooks, it's not even funny. My favorite introductory textbooks are the Genki textbooks. So Genki 1 and Genki 2 are very good for beginners. And then if your goal is to pass the Japanese language proficiency test, I would also recommend Nihongo So Matome. They're like leveled by which level of the proficiency test that you want to pass. And I thought that they were really accessible and kind of fun. So those are my 2 textbook recommendations. And I really struggle with learning Japanese kanji. So I think something that would help others who are in the same boat as me, there's an application, I only know the one for iPhone, sorry, but it's called Yomiwa. And it saved me because you can use your phone and use the camera to take a picture of like the lettering, and then the app will read the lettering for you. So it's a really good tool, especially for beginners of Japanese, if you need to read a sign or understand something when you're out and about going to the bank. So yeah, it's Yomiwa. And then my favorite dictionary is Imiwa. So I got a million.
And we could probably go on all day with in Betsy's case, I'm sure. All right, thank you so much. The Google Translate, obviously I wouldn't use it for just basic translating. If you want to catch the gist of something, it's fine. But there's a handwriting feature built into Google Translate that is fantastic for kanji recognition. So even if you don't know stroke order and you're really not good at writing kanji, you can still just kind of sort of write something in there, and it's really good at detecting what you're trying to write. So if you don't know the reading for particular kanji that are like put together, if you can just write them out individually, like Google's pretty good about picking that up. So I guess that's like a recommendation from me, and I could talk all day about this topic too. I really like Rishma's point and Andrew's point about setting goals and just kind of like putting yourself out there and making mistakes too. I majored in Japanese, and so I had a pretty high level on paper when I came here. But like Rishma, when I went to the convenience store and I just like wanted to strike up a conversation, they would ask if I needed chopsticks or a bag, and even that was just when spoken natively, and it just kind of caught me off guard. I just like couldn't catch it the first couple times, and I was like, well, how do I even respond, right? And so it's just about kind of putting yourself out there and making these mistakes, and just kind of thinking about, what are my weaknesses? What do I need to improve on? What do I want to improve on, I guess? If you want to practice writing a lot, if you want to write about your experiences in Japan in Japanese, that's a great way. But that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. It's not going to be everyone's goal. And you certainly don't need to be able to do that for the JLPT. So like Andrew said, thinking about the goals that you want to reach. And I guess to plug a Claire resource here, we do offer Japanese language courses. They are online for self-study, which is definitely also not everyone's cup of tea, but this is kind of a new and improved version of the resource that we used to offer. And I think since a few years ago or so, it's all online and accessible at any time on either the web or on phone apps as well. So if you are the kind of person who can enjoy sitting down and doing some self-study using an app, that's fine. I recommend trying that at least. It's a free resource offered by Claire. Okay, so let's go ahead and stick with this topic for just a little bit longer, using Japanese, and let's kind of shift it more towards like the workplace. And this is possibly a slightly, can be an opinionated topic here, but using Japanese in the classroom. A lot of people think that we should only be using English. Some people think that it's okay to use Japanese sometimes when you just cannot get the meaning across. So first of all, just as a general question, and I think we've already kind of answered this, but do you think having a good command of Japanese is essential for just functioning in the workplace? And then also, secondly, what are your thoughts on using it in the English classroom specifically? Let's maybe start with Betsy on this. Is that okay?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I do. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I do use Japanese in the classroom, and I really do think that it's a very useful tool for English, is if you can actually reciprocate, in my opinion. Do you mind if I go on, or should I open up to others?
Go for it.
Okay.
Totally.
I think that when I first arrived, I did know some Japanese coming into Japan, And I was advised to pretend that I didn't know any. So I thought, okay, I will pretend not to know any Japanese so that students are encouraged to speak English with me. And that became very awkward very quickly because students then thought, oh, she doesn't know Japanese. So if we talk about her right in front of her, she won't know what we're saying. Nothing bad was being said, but it was just awkward because I knew what they were saying, but I was trying to fake that I didn't. So I would say just be yourself, and at whatever language level that you're coming in at, that's completely fine. But I do think that learning some level actually encourages students to ask you questions. In the classroom, when I first started co-teaching, students would often ask the JTE, the Japanese teacher of English, the majority of the questions about grammar and how do I use this and is this correct. But as I kind of opened up and showed, I do know some Japanese and I can explain some things in Japanese, then students now ask me a lot, like, Betsy Sensei, is this correct? How is this? How do you use this? So I think the JTEs have given me a lot of positive feedback and said, like, you're having some command of Japanese has really opened up students to talking with you. So we appreciate that. So I thought, oh, yes.
Nice. Okay, how about you, Rishma? Do you have any opinions on this?
Yeah, well, I made it very clear when I first came. It was in my Jiko Shokai. I told everyone, hi, my name's Rishma. I don't know any Japanese, but I did join a class. So I feel like with especially my Ichinensei students, we were learning at the same time. You know, they were learning the alphabet, so was I. They were learning how to introduce themselves, oh, me too. So growing with them in the first year and them watching me struggle trying to say things in Japanese actually made them feel really comfortable struggling in English. So a lot of times I might say something in English and I'll say, okay, well, if you guys can practice this, I'll try to write it on the board, you know, and they would laugh at the way that I would write the hiragana and katakana, but at the same time they would want to come up on the board and show me how they could write it in English. So I felt that it was a great way to kind of definitely language exchange, culture exchange, it was going on. And the students were so eager to help me with my pronunciation that when the tables turned and it was me to teach them English pronunciation, they were just as receptive to it. I find it also made the JT that I was teaching with very comfortable because his pronunciation wasn't always accurate, but the students could see, okay, everyone here is learning. So I didn't want to go in knowing a ton of Japanese and having that, like, you know, being able to speak fluently, but I think showing them that I was meeting halfway works, because there are some classes where you do need to use a bit of it or else nothing would make sense, as Betsy was saying. Like sometimes you have to just to use the language. Yeah, so other times I would work it in different ways. So I would probably plan an entire lesson in English and I would show them the kanji for a word and try and have them guess or go back into their memory to see if I can get them to reproduce what that word was in English. And then the JT would say, no, it actually means this. So not totally English, but finding that safe middle ground where they're still learning, they're still thinking, but for the weaker students are able to understand and kind of catch up with everyone.
Definitely. I think it kind of presents you as kind of a role model, like whenever you're learning the language from scratch too. You're sort of going through that same pain of learning a new language. And so,
yeah,
I definitely agree. Andrew, do you have any thoughts to add to this topic? Or
So I can sort of present the elementary school situation.
Sure.
You know, at that age, you know, a lot of the students, you know, don't really understand anything but Japanese. And so, I mean, it is important, you know, to plan your lessons ahead of time with your JTEs. But by the same token, if you sort of reading the room and you know, trying to explain to the students, yeah, I needed to use a little bit of Japanese just to make them understand. Or that's what I thought at first. But afterwards, I sort of figured out that elementary school kids really respond a lot to gestures, things like that. So I would be, talking about the rules of a game, for example, and say, at first, I wasn't sure what I should be doing. So I say, in Japanese, make a circle, make a circle. But they just started listening for the Japanese instead of, actually trying to think about what the English was. So then I would just say, okay, so let's just say circle, circle, like that, and just sort of make the gesture and say the English word. And 9 times out of 10, they would understand exactly. They're trying to figure it out. And so they really want to understand what I'm saying. So I found that I didn't need to use as much Japanese as I did in the beginning, even for something like difficult, like explaining how to play a game of musical chairs or something. On paper, that sounds very difficult to try to explain to students, but with simple, English phrases, you can really get them to understand a lot. And so even, in my case, sometimes the JTEs would sort of help out with difficult things if they really weren't getting something, and they would sort of help out with that. But I would always try in very, very simple English to sort of model what I wanted them to do, and then just practice words and get them to repeat over and over and over again. And so I actually stopped using as much Japanese in the classroom as I did, after the first month or so, because I found out they didn't really need it. But on a sort of different case, in junior high school, I found that knowing some of the words for like Japanese parts of speech is really helpful when they're doing like paperwork or something like that. And so that like I can say, maybe not the first time, but after they've asked a couple times, maybe isn't this, the past tense, isn't this kakoke or something like that? And they know that that's what they're studying. So they can sort of get them back into that mindset. Okay, that's a problem with past tense or something like that. But even in junior high school, I would tend to, if they speak to me and ask me something in Japanese, I would always respond in English. So it made these sort of weird conversations at first, but always trying to be a model of English first. And then really, if they don't understand what was going on, using maybe that one phrase of, okay, this is a problem with the past participle or something like that, kako bunshike or something. Just learning some of those words, that technical terminology really helped me, I think, to become a better teacher in junior high school. So that was sort of my experience with Japanese. I used it a lot at first and then not so much after that. But, everybody has their own, sort of way of doing things and strategy in the classroom. One isn't better or worse than the other. It's just what fits you. So try to find a flow that fits you.
Yeah, and also I think what fits the school too, what fits the JTE, because the JTE might have their own opinion. They might say like, do not speak Japanese.
That's true.
But I also would maybe be careful about getting into a situation where you're explaining things in English and then it just gets translated into Japanese. And so it's just taking up twice the amount of time to do the same thing. I found myself in that kind of situation. And so I just started using Japanese, but that was also kind of a mistake. I found that if I just use very simple gestures, a lot of examples, and just like acting out the activity and just thinking really carefully about how I want to explain this and get this, communicate this idea without making it overly complicated, it actually just completely removed the need to explain anything in Japanese. And so, yeah, like Andrew said, like maybe over time, you'll find ways to kind of try and not rely on it so much as a crutch. But for very abstract topics and for like things like particles and things like that, just getting a quick idea across, it can be very helpful. So certainly, thank you very much all for your answers. If I guess for the sake of time, I don't want to spend too much time on this next question, and it is about time, ironically, but downtime at work. I'm curious, just maybe very briefly, maybe just kind of rapid fire, what all of you over the years have found yourself doing. I'm sure maybe there's some mix of like Japanese study, lesson planning, things like that for far in the future. So just kind of in a quicker fashion, what do you all get involved in during your downtime? And maybe start with Betsy, if that's okay.
I don't really have a lot of downtime at work because I need to be using the time when I don't have classes to be planning my classes. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, kind of a blessing, but yeah, a little bit tough on the schedule. But when I do have downtime, I think what's most important for me is to come into the day with a list of things that I can be working on or doing. If I don't have something prepared in advance, I won't use my time as effectively. So if I know, okay, this week I don't have any classes, but I need to get some lessons prepared for the third year students, and I need to create my materials for the first year students. So I need to finish those things. I can write a blog for the students to read during the summer. I think just having that list of things that I could be doing during that time makes me motivated. But if I come into the day, I don't have a list, I don't have anything, then that's when I kind of start to struggle a little bit, like, oh, well, I guess I should just, maybe I can study or, you know, work on something else. But I would say as much as you can, don't try to engage in like some leisure time activities at your desk, because even though some other teachers will, and if that's your school culture and that's what people do, that's fine. But I would say err on the side of caution and always try to be working while you're at your desk, because you don't want to send any sort of bad vibes to everyone that you're not a motivated individual, or that you're not there to do your job and be helpful. So I would say try to focus on work first, and then if that's the last thing that you can do, maybe you can study, maybe you could, you know, read a book or something like that.
Sure. Okay. Does anyone else have anything else to add? Thank you, Betsy.
Yeah. So aside from, you know, lesson planning and Japanese study, also planning activities for English club and international lunch. So whatever clubs I'm involved in, I'll try to find, you know, something interesting to share with them, some interesting discussion topics or essay topics. Another thing that I do, which kind of helps with communication with my JTs, is I would try and read the news and see what's going on. And I would usually pick something that's interesting and would bring that up as a topic, like, hey, did you hear about this? So, you know, do you know there's a typhoon coming? Are you worried? And little things like that. And that's something I noticed that the JTs would talk amongst themselves in Japanese. So I would just try to read the English news and bring that up in conversation. I've also found, like, when I tell some of my Japanese teachers of English that I have a free period or free time, sometimes they want to use that as an opportunity to have like a small chat. They generally just want to practice their English, and I don't mind relaxing and having conversation with them, but just letting them know, oh, I have a free period. Do you want to meet? And we would just go to the small, you know, like tea room and just have tea and chat. So that's been really nice. Good relationship building things as an ALT.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rishma. Andrew, do you have anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, aside from everything that was already mentioned, two things. I had an English board at my school, so I'd prepare things for that. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but maybe about the Olympics, or put up topics that the students might be interested about. But one other thing is that when I did have some free time, and I talked to the teacher ahead of time to confirm that this was okay, but I spent a lot of time and sort of one-on-one time with some of my special needs students. I had classes with them often, but in a classroom setting, it's sort of very difficult for them to learn, maybe from the standard way from like a textbook or something like that. So having just like time to chat in English between periods or something like that was something that I found was really valuable, and I got to get to know the students really, really well. And it was just sort of a fun, no stress filled way to sort of hang out and help them out a little bit with their English, get to know them, and share, my culture and things like that. One of my special needs students really loved video games, and he was always drawing things from video games all over the whiteboards in the rooms and things like that. And so, he was asking, oh, have you heard of this game called Minecraft? And yeah, yes, of course. And so we were able to share and sort of bond over that. So see, what other classes or things you might be able to participate in. I mean, make sure to get permission beforehand before just sort of wandering off, going down the halls or something like that. But you might be able to spend, more one-on-one time with your students and get to know them in a different capacity other than just, the English room as the English teacher, something like that.
Great. Well, thank you all very much for sharing a little bit about that. I'm going to change gears a little bit and talk about some possible difficulties that you might have run into. Professional hardships, could be personal as well. And just kind of, if you could describe, you don't have to go into too much detail, but just kind of in a problem-solving fashion, you know, how are you able to overcome this? And in particular, I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about culture shock and culture fatigue and how you might have dealt with that, because I think that is something that pretty much everybody hits at some point to some degree. So, you know, what was that experience like? And really, I'll just kind of open this up to anybody who would like to, yeah, say something.
Um,
Sure, Andrew?
if I can speak
Yeah.
to the first part of your question, yeah, not so much the cultural fatigue part of it, but just a hardship that I experienced. And I think it's important to keep this in mind, that this does happen. That I was in, you know, an area of southwestern Japan that had a big earthquake in 2016. And so, you know, being in sort of a disaster like that, it was very difficult for me. I'm from an area in the United States which has earthquakes, so it wasn't the first earthquake I had ever experienced. But, you know, in a different culture, and when you're not sure who to talk to, you know, it can be really overwhelming at times. You know, I wished I had been more prepared, had some sort of like emergency pack or something like that with me. I had the Claire emergency guide, pocket guide, which is a very valuable resource that you should use. But I had that, so all the different numbers to call and things like that. But the actual earthquake, in my case, hit very early in the morning. And so, you know, I wasn't sure, and it was very scary. But the system that we had in place in our prefecture, you know, the prefectural advisors were able to get in contact with us very soon. And, you know, everybody was sort of accounted for. And it was really quick. And I got some calls immediately, even during the night, from teachers who were just concerned about me, and some texts and things like that. And then, yeah, for a while, you know, lifelines, it was kind of hard to get some supplies in the stores for a while. But again, I mentioned this in the beginning, but I live near one of my teachers who I met when I first got to my little area. And so he actually came to my door to check up on me to see if I had everything, was doing okay. And so, yeah, no, overall, you know, there were aftershocks and things like that. And our area was not the most affected area of that. But, you know, our school really had a good system in place. And, you know, there was a lot of support available for me in my particular situation. And I sort of felt relieved to know that there was that support that was available for me. But again, for new people who do come to Japan, disasters do happen. And, you know, don't be overly, you know, fearful, but just be aware that these things do happen. And if you have time to, you know, make a little pack or something to have enough, you know, like a flashlight, some extra water supplies, things like that. You never know when you might need it. So that was one thing that happened to me with regards to that. I'll let others speak towards maybe cultural fatigue or some different aspects, but that was sort of my hardship that I had when I was here in Japan.
I'm glad that you're safe and you made it out okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
I can talk a little bit about culture shock in the workplace,
Sure.
especially for people who might have work experience before JET, or have even been, you know, T1s in classrooms in other countries. The Japanese style of English teaching could be quite shocking, and just the general workplace culture is very different. There's a lot of things we have to understand and figure out, and know, you know, where we fall in the ranks of teachers and what we should be doing and shouldn't be doing, things like that. I think one of the things I definitely learned was how to ask for feedback in very specific ways. So I found oftentimes when I planned a lesson, it's not easy to say, oh, what did you think went well? What would you like to fix? That didn't really go down so well, because the JT will not tell you the truth. They'll just say, oh, it's fine, it's fine. So what I learned to do is ask for samples of activities that they have done that went well. I say, oh, can I see a lesson plan that you did with so-and-so sensei? And having them show me rather than say it to my face definitely helped figuring out what they wanted to do and where they wanted to go. Andrew mentioned that his school was very sports focused. So I think knowing that about whatever school you may be at is really helpful. Like my school is heavy on the tech. And so I knew that I could use, you know, iPads, I could use different websites and apps, and the kids would respond to that. Where I have friends who work in schools that are very, very low tech. And students don't even know how to write an email, for example. So knowing that about your school definitely will help you to figure out how you should plan your goals and your lessons, so you're not overwhelmed by those things. But yeah.
All right, thank you, Rishma. Betsy, do you have anything you'd like to add?
As for culture shock or culture fatigue, I think one thing that everybody will go through at one point or another is just kind of a sense of being a little bit isolated, because you're probably living in a culture where you don't have many or any family members with you. You don't have the same support network that you built in your previous country. So I think the most important thing to do if you're feeling lonely is to reach out to someone. And I think that there is a lot of pressure in society here to kind of like hold it in or just like fight through it, or, you know, gamang. But I think I would really encourage everyone to push back against that a little bit. And if you do need help, tell someone, or if you need someone just to hear about what happened that day. Like what was mentioned before, just having that shoulder to lean on is really, really important. And I think if you sincerely ask someone for help or to listen to you, then you will be very, very happily surprised with just how many people will come forward willing to help you with whatever problem you might be having. So yeah, don't gaman, don't hold it back. Just tell someone.
Okay, so the next question is, well, currently we've got a rather unusual situation that we're facing around the world, and I'd just like to ask our current ALTs, Rishma and Betsy, just kind of the impact of coronavirus, and maybe on a personal level, like in the daily lives, and also at work. How is it affecting your workplace? Do you have any advice in coping with the situation? Maybe we can start with Rishma, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about what my school has done. So there are a lot of new procedures, coronavirus procedures that we have to adhere to. So things like you have to wear a mask when you enter the school compound. You have to wear a face shield to teach, especially in summer. That's really difficult, but it is necessary. So I would say, you know, every school has their own mandated list of things that you have to do. There are temperature checks for teachers and students. There's alcohol sprays in every classroom. And then after the class is done, we have to wipe down all of the desks with alcohol. And that's something that has been done rigorously for the last 2 or 3 months or so. We have a change in schedule. So we start at 10 and we end at 3:30 instead of our usual starting at 8. And no clubs. So none of the students can practice any club activities, which is quite sad for them. And it's just been going to work and going to school. In terms of lesson planning for the ALT, that has been difficult because as an English language teacher, we want them to be speaking and do group work and pair work, and all of that has been, you know, banned. So it's finding creative ways. So what I've started doing is showing them little like video comprehensions and gap fills and music, and having them do a lot of worksheets and still trying to make it as interesting as possible. We had the idea of using, you know, paddles, like yes or no paddles that they can lift up when they have an answer instead of verbally saying it out loud. So yeah, not terrible, but definitely new ways of adapting to life in a pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Rishma. Betsy, what's going on at your local level?
Well, the school that I'm at now is in Kobe, Japan, which is still experiencing the COVID crisis very much, but not to the same level as in Tokyo. So when the state of emergency was declared in Japan, I was very thankful that we were able to work from home during that time. So we had to report in about the work that we were doing, and I spent that time trying to figure out how to teach English conversation without being able to actually have conversations, much like Krishma. And I spent some time making videos. So I would make like some kind of cultural videos or just videos about what was going on in my daily life, asking students what they were doing in their daily lives during the crisis. And they were keeping English diaries about their daily life during the time. And they're now able to come back to school. So I was able to read their diaries, and I responded to all of them, which took a really long time, but I thought it was a really good way to connect with them in a way that didn't involve direct conversation. So being able to have like exchange diaries might be a good way to get around that part of the not being able to speak closely with students. Here, they've started to kind of relax the restrictions. So students have to wear masks at all times during class. They do tend to start to take them off when class is not in session, which is also not okay, but we have to remind them, keep your mask on. So everybody's like, but it's hot, but being hot is better than contracting the virus. So that's changed a lot. I really used to like going to restaurants and going out shopping, and I haven't been doing any of that, just going to work, going straight home. Riding on the train has been a little bit stressful, but I always just keep my mask on, try to face away from people, and yeah, life will go on.
Indeed, it is definitely a difficult time, I think, for everyone, but it is very encouraging to hear that you've all found these like pretty good ways, I think, to cope with the challenges presented by the pandemic. So thank you all again for sharing. I do appreciate that. And I'd like to go ahead and push things in a slightly more positive direction now. And let's talk about a little bit about our placements in JET. I'm just curious, what do you love about the area in which you were placed on JET? What are the highlights? Maybe if there's a slight drawback and how you got around that. But you know, what was great about where you are placed on JET? Who would like to start? Betsy.
I love my placement in JET so much. Kobe is a wonderful, wonderful city. It is my second home. And I'm really thankful because I feel like even during what's been going on now with the coronavirus pandemic, you know, I'm safe and I'm healthy. I have a job, which is, I mean, I feel incredibly blessed to have these things in my life, which I know a lot of people around the world are struggling with. So yeah, that's the first thing, is that it's just been incredible so far. It's been very trying for everyone, but at the same time, there are a lot of things that I should be thankful for. And I think the best part about where I live is that it's a big city, but it's not quite as big as Tokyo or Osaka. So you still get a lot of those at-home feelings. People know your face. You can talk with everyone. And yeah, it's just really wonderful and warm. So the people are what make my placement great so far.
Fantastic. Thank you, Betsy. All right, who would like to chime in next?
I can chime in. Yeah, I've been away from my second home in Kumamoto for a while now, but I really miss a lot of the simple things there. The ramen was incredible. I loved it. It was so good. There were 13 ramen shops in this small town. And so everybody would ask, you know, what's your favorite ramen shop? And everybody had a different opinion. It was like something we actually worked into English lessons quite often because it was just something everybody talked about. There's good hot springs in our town, and just Kyushu in general is just a very nice, very laid back place to be, I think. And again, I mentioned I was sort of in a rural area, And so there were rice paddies, you know, all around. And that was something I was not used to growing up in suburban Los Angeles, to have like a tractor going down the road, you know, just in the one lane road going each way, and then you just being behind a tractor or something like that. But this is sort of a different way of life for me, and something that I really miss now that I'm in Tokyo and everything is so big, and it can be overwhelming at times. But yeah, I really do miss my home in Kumamoto.
I was going to say, I'm from a place in the United States where you see tractors on the roads all the time. And I came to Tokyo, and so it's just the complete opposite. Rishma, you're in Tokyo now. What do you like about it?
Everything. There's nothing to hate about Tokyo. Even the things that are terrible are the things that I love, because I feel like a lot of people tell me that Tokyo is not a good representation of Japan. Like, Tokyo is not Japan, Tokyo is Tokyo. And only after traveling to other prefectures, I've realized, yeah, there are some things that can only happen in Tokyo, like the crazy rush hour trains and, you know, people sleeping on the streets after midnight. Good times. But but it is very exciting to be living in such a bustling city. I think as someone who enjoys, you know, intercultural experiences, running into people from all over the world in Tokyo has just been fascinating, and finding niche little communities, like even my own country having such a big community in Tokyo was surprising for me. And like you mentioned before, Pierce, that even though it's so big, there are ways of finding your own little family, your own little community in such a large space. So yeah, come visit Tokyo.
Tokyo. All right, last question, everyone. I'd like to just kind of head back in time to the first time whenever you came on JET. And if you could just kind of take the knowledge and experience you have now and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be? Open floor. Anybody can answer this.
Don't be afraid of making mistakes. I was so nervous, you know, when I first came and wanted to do everything right the first time. I wanted all the teachers to like me. I wanted all the students to think I was the best sensei that they had ever had, or something like that. And you know, you get so nervous and so in such a ball of energy that you end up just tiring yourself out. Just realize that, you know, making mistakes is okay, that it will take, you know, time to get into your groove, but you'll get there eventually. So just don't be so nervous about that in the beginning, I think.
And I guess I would say, like, enthusiasm and like passion is contagious. So a lot of the times I might doubt myself, like, oh, maybe they wouldn't be interested in this. But then I started to learn, you know, if I was really interested and engaged and I had a lot of information, I could show a lot of things about it, students would naturally gravitate and be willing and excited, and the people around me would be as equally thrilled with whatever it was I was, you know, sharing. So just, you know, follow your passions. If there's something that you like and you want to talk about, even if it's not in the textbook, even if it's not, you know, on the train of thought, go for it.
All right, and Betsy.
More philosophical side of my advice would be, don't be afraid of being who you are and being different from other people. I think it's very natural when you come to another country that you're going to want to learn about the culture, and you're of course wanting to show respect. So you will, I think, conform to some cultural norms around you, but I don't think that means that you need to change the core of who you are, because I think that is what will make people gravitate towards you, is that you are different and that you do have a new culture to share. So I think you should just remember, hold on to yourself, and don't be afraid to be genuinely who you are, because people will love you for that. And the other advice that is way on the other side is that if you have big feet, please bring shoes from your home country.
Very good advice. Glad that you went back.
I can second that.
Because I was going to say, I wanted to add a snarky comment or something about, like, you should invest in a parasol for the sun because it's really hot here, and it actually makes a big difference if you have one. Or I don't know, something like, you know, get an eco bag because you have to pay for plastic bags now or something like that. But
Yes.
yeah, there's so many little tiny things like that, like shoes. I know I have big feet. I do like, it's such a pain shoe shopping here.
I mean, and that for me, like for anyone from a country, you know, with a lot of sun, like please walk with your own moisturizer and things like that, because you definitely, skincare is important. Japanese winter is dry, and these are the things no one tells you about until you get here and you wonder, why didn't I bring moisturizer? So, a parasol, big pair of shoes, that.
And if your hair is like a different texture, bring the hair products that you like, because chances are they may not have some hair products that are suitable for your type of hair. And then, yeah, if you have any sort of toiletries that you can't do without, stock up and bring them with you.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, well, unfortunately, we're now out of time. We've hit the end of today's panel discussion. I'm sure that everyone in the audience has appreciated your insight and tips, and I hope that everyone will make the best use of those tips in their everyday life. I guess just to kind of put a cap on this, as we say in Japanese, to show appreciation for the hard work you've put in. Otsukare-sama deshita. Thank you so much, Rishma and Betsy, for agreeing to participate. Thank you, Andrew, as well, for your time. And yeah, that's about it. So I'd like to thank you all for watching.
Thank you very much.
Good luck on JET.